Hi there everyone. Today I'm reviewing Sparta's Sicilian Proxy War by Paul Anthony Rahe. So this book covers Sparta's engagements on Sicily to stop Athens taking Syracuse, a rich and powerful Dorian city. To stop them exerting control over the island, a hub of the Mediterranean Sea, Sparta would eventually support Syracuse under attack from the Athenians. Part proxy war, part engagement between two principal city-states, part complex political and military escapade, or set of escapades, Dr. Rahe takes us through an account of what really went on. The Sicilian expedition would contribute to Athens not being able to establish a power base on Sicily, but also cause a significant loss of life and military force, probably in the thousands of men and ships. 10 years later, they would go on to lose the Peloponnesian War, the Athenians. And although it is perhaps surprising that they last that long after this expedition, it likely contributed to the eventual loss. Rahe recounts events in exacting detail. As an expert on Sparta and what he terms their grand strategy, he's well versed in the subject and it really shows. In fact, I found it a little too heavy on the detail. But I suspect this book is aimed at an audience that already knows about the Peloponnesian War. You know, it's far more aimed at academics than the kind of casual reader. Nonetheless, given that I've read several of his other works and that the Sicilian expedition can be quite convoluted anyway, not just in this book, just in terms of the actual events that went on, with many different factions and characters, places and events, even in Thucydides' account, it's worth noting that this is definitely like a heavier going read. As Rahe notes himself, we're fortunate that Thucydides' own account is exemplary. It means that although we shouldn't necessarily always take him at face value, he does a much better job than many other ancient authors of staying objective. And this is especially true given that he was actually involved in the war. He was an Athenian general himself. And he's really good at relaying the evidence and kind of setting out the facts for the most part. According to his own testimony, he spent a lot of time going and speaking with people across various city-states for his history of the Peloponnesian War. Similarly, Rahe, in his own account of this in this book, is careful to avoid kind of missing pieces of information, kind of considering the wider picture, motivations and competing factions within the city-states, Alcibiades provoking war, for example, or how violent Cleon is, and the kind of contrast between them with Nicias, who negotiated peace, but Rahe also treads carefully or highlights how Thucydides portrays these characters. I sometimes found in this book that the Greek terminology sometimes kind of obstructed the flow. There's quite a lot of it, as did the usage of son of, rather than using patronymics. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Which I think was to provide flavour. But sometimes it became muddy in the midst of so many events, people and places, even for someone accustomed with the subject and many of the figures. Rahe lays out who these are, the philosophy, the kind of influences that went into this expedition, and the aims of those involved, before getting into the recounting of events, which are heavy, as I said, and I won't cover here for brevity. His analysis is careful, and like I said, he considers a lot of the options and eventualities in terms of what kind of forces were moving where, why certain decisions were taken. And Thucydides doesn't always mention everything, of course, it'd probably be impossible, but Rahe's good at kind of highlighting those. So the kind of expedition, these set of events that you could call kind of almost like several events and expeditions and kind of competing forces trying to win over this site of Syracuse, it comes to its apogee when Sparta gets directly involved. And in a chaotic fight in the dark, the Athenians lose to the Syracusans and Spartans. Rahe, again, doesn't neglect to consider the wider repercussions here on the Second Attic War, basically the sort of end part of the Peloponnesian War, and the Athenian losses. And it's worth noting that he has several books devoted to those events, and Sparta herself. I'm going to open with a quote. So Thucydides is basically talking about kind of rationality and influence here. So I open quote. Later in his history, Thucydides returns to this theme, forcefully reminding his readers of the unreasoning, immoderate, and unrestrained character of Eros, when he digresses from his narrative to debunk the foundation myth of the Athenian democracy. Where his contemporaries were inclined to trace the origins of the democracy to the conspiracy mounted at Athens against the tyranny of Pisistratus' sons by Harmodius and Aristogeiton a century before, the son of Olorus demonstrates that their conspiracy had little, if anything, to do with a free-spirited love of freedom, and much to do with the sexual predilections of the Pisistratid Hipparchus, and with the private erotic relationship uniting the two chief conspirators. And that's from page 92. Also, the appendix contains a discussion on kind of grand strategy and what exactly that means and how it differs from strategy, based on Morgenthau's Politics Among Nations. And it's well worth reading, I think, just to give wider context and how Rahe's coming at this book, considering the politics and pointing to the repercussions of proxy wars ever since these events. So in terms of final score, if you are looking for a detailed account of the Sicilian proxy war that Sparta undertook, this is a worthy one. It's very detailed, and it uses Thucydides as, pretty much all the writers about the Peloponnesian War do as its robust basis. But Rahe kind of considers how these fit into Sparta's wider grand strategy and other events. Just be aware it is heavy going, and it's definitely more on the academic side. So I think if this is or isn't what you're looking for, will influence the kind of score of this. So you kind of need to raise or lower accordingly, I think. So I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. It's definitely solid, and it covers so much detail on events. It's a bit hard to get your head around at times, but if you want information, if you're trying to study it and understand it, this is a really good place to go. So I'm reviewing plenty more ancient history books on my channel alongside a range of other genres. So like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.